in the heart of the crystalline spires of Virilith, capital world of the Zyran Dominion, where gravity hummed like a lullaby and the sky shimmered with twin moons, stood the grand palace of Queen Lysara, its walls woven from living quartz that pulsed faintly with the memories of centuries. The air inside smelled of ozone and blooming moon petals, a scent both sharp and sweet, as if the palace itself breathed anticipation. It was here, in the Hall of Echoing Judgments, that Queen Lysara sat upon her throne of fused starlight, her purple skin gleaming under the ambient glow of floating orbs, her long white hair cascading like frozen rivers down her armored back. She had summoned the human prisoner not for execution, nor for interrogation, but because something about his file had pricked her curiosity like a thorn beneath silk. Single-handedly held off 3 Zyran shock squads during the Battle of Core Vale, refused to retreat even after sustaining plasma burns across 40% of his body. Most humans broke under half that. This one hadn't broken at all. The human entered flanked by 2 towering Zyran guards, their obsidian armor clinking softly with each step. He wore the tattered remnants of a coalition infantry uniform, scorched and bloodied, yet he walked with his spine straight, shoulders squared, eyes fixed ahead, not with defiance, but with quiet resolve. His helmet, dented and scratched, covered his face entirely, its visor dark and unreadable. Queen Lysara studied him, her violet eyes narrowing slightly. She had seen countless prisoners brought before her, some weeping, some snarling, some bargaining with trembling voices. But this man moved like a mountain shifting, slow, inevitable, unafraid. "Remove your restraints," she commanded, her voice resonant, layered with harmonics that made the very air vibrate. The guards hesitated, glancing at each other. "I said remove them," she repeated, sharper now. With reluctant clicks, the energy cuffs around the human's wrists disengaged and fell away. He flexed his fingers once, then clasped them behind his back, still silent. For a long moment, the only sound was the soft chime of wind crystals drifting through the high arches of the hall. Then, leaning forward just slightly, Queen Lysara issued her order. "Take off your helmet." The human didn't move immediately. He seemed to weigh the command, not out of disobedience, but as if considering what lay beneath it. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached up with both hands, unlatched the seals at his neck, and lifted the helmet away. Queen Lysara's breath caught. Beneath the helmet was not the hardened, scarred face of a battle-scarred soldier she'd expected. Instead, she saw a man perhaps in his early 30s, with warm brown eyes that held galaxies of weariness and kindness, a strong jaw softened by a faint, almost boyish dimple, and short, tousled black hair dusted with ash. There was no arrogance in his expression, no fear, only a quiet dignity, as though he had long ago made peace with whatever fate awaited him. But what truly stunned her was the small, faded tattoo on his left temple. A tiny bird in flight, inked with such delicacy it looked like a memory rather than a mark. Among her people, such tattoos were sacred, reserved only for those who had saved a life without expectation of reward. Humans didn't share that tradition. Yet there it was. "You?" she began, then stopped, her voice faltering for the first time in decades. "You bear the sigil of unseen mercy." The human blinked, surprised. "This? It's just an old tattoo. Got it when I was 19. My little sister drew it for me before she passed." Lysara's chest tightened. Her own younger sister had died in the Purge Wars, clutching a carved wooden bird in her hands. The coincidence was impossible. And yet, she rose from her throne, her ceremonial robes, woven with threads of captured nebulae, rippling around her like liquid twilight. The courtiers gasped. No queen of Zyra had ever descended from the dais to approach a prisoner. But Lysara didn't care. She stepped down, her bare feet silent on the polished floor, until she stood barely an arm's length from the human. "What is your name?" she asked, softer now. "Joran," he replied. "Joran Vale." "Joran Vale," she repeated, tasting the syllables like rare wine. "You defended Core Vale alone. Why?" He shrugged. A small, humble gesture. "There were kids in the refugee convoy. Couldn't let them get caught in the crossfire." Her heart hammered against her ribs. During the battle, her own scouts had reported a lone human dragging wounded Zyran children to safety alongside human civilians, a detail she dismissed as battlefield confusion. Now she wondered. Before she could speak again, alarms blared through the palace. A deep, guttural wail that meant breach. Red light flooded the hall as holographic displays flickered to life above the pillars. A rebel faction, the Crimson Fong, had infiltrated the lower citadel. They sought to assassinate her and seize the Heartstone, the source of Zyran unity and power. Chaos erupted. Courtiers screamed and fled. Guards scrambled into formation. But Joran didn't move. He simply turned toward the source of the disturbance, his posture shifting instantly from calm captive to coiled readiness. "They're coming through the sunken archives," Lysara said, her voice regaining its steel. "They'll reach the heart chamber in minutes." Joran met her gaze. "Then we don't have minutes." She stared at him. "You would fight for us? After we imprisoned you?" He gave a small, wry smile. "I don't fight for flags or thrones. I fight for people. And right now, you're standing between those monsters and a whole palace full of them." Something in his words struck her deeper than any blade. Without another word, Lysara activated her wrist calm. "Seal the inner sanctum. Deploy the skyward sentinels." "And?" She paused, glancing at Joran. "Arm the human." A guard hesitated, holding out a plasma rifle. Joran took it with practiced ease, checked the charge, and nodded. "Let's go." What followed was a blur of motion and fire. Through corridors of singing crystal and gardens suspended in anti-gravity fields, they raced toward the heart chamber. Crimson Fong rebels, scarred, fanatical, clad in jagged armor, ambushed them twice. Joran moved like water given form, ducking, weaving, firing with precision that spoke of years in the trenches. He didn't kill unless necessary. Instead, he disabled, disarmed, used the environment to his advantage. At one point, he kicked a hovering lantern into a rebel's face, blinding him long enough for Lysara to strike with her energy whip. "You're good," she admitted as they sprinted across a bridge of solidified light. "Had good teachers," he said, breathing hard. "Most of them didn't make it." She wanted to ask more. About his sister, his past, why a man like him ended up alone on a war-torn moon. But there was no time. They reached the heart chamber just as the lead rebel, a hulking brute with cybernetic tusks, raised a detonator. "The Heartstone dies tonight," he roared. Lysara lunged, but Joran was faster. He threw his rifle like a spear, striking the detonator from the rebel's hand. Then he charged, unarmed, using sheer momentum to tackle the giant to the ground. They rolled, crashing into the chamber's central pedestal, where the Heartstone pulsed, a sphere of swirling violet light, humming with the collective consciousness of billions. The rebel pulled a vibroblade. Joran blocked with his forearm, taking a deep gash. Blood, bright red, so different from her own indigo, spilled onto the stone floor. The Heartstone flared violently, reacting to the violence, to the pain. "No!" Lysara cried. She leapt forward, placing herself between them, her hands outstretched. "The Heartstone senses suffering. If it shatters, our entire species loses its bond." The rebel laughed, raising his blade again. But Joran, bleeding and exhausted, did something unexpected. He placed his bloody hand on the Heartstone and sang. It was a simple tune, soft, wordless, achingly human. A lullaby his mother used to sing. The Heartstone responded instantly, its violent pulsing softening, its light warming to gold. The rebel froze, confused, disoriented by the sudden shift in energy. In that moment, Lysara struck, her whip coiling around his throat, rendering him unconscious. Silence fell. Joran slumped against the pedestal, clutching his arm. Lysara rushed to him, tearing a strip from her robe to bind the wound. Her fingers trembled. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. "You could have died." He looked at her, his eyes gentle. "Because someone had to stop the bleeding. Not just mine." Tears, real, glistening tears, formed in her eyes. Zyrans rarely cried. Their biology made it difficult. But this human, this stranger, had touched something ancient and buried within her. Later, in the healing chambers, as Medrone sealed his wound with biogel, Lysara sat beside him. The palace was secure. The rebels were in custody. The Heartstone glowed peacefully once more. "You saved my people," she said. "Not just today. Encore Vale too." He shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," she said firmly. "Not anyone. Only you." She reached out, tentatively, and took his hand. His skin was warm, rough with calluses, yet his grip was tender. "Stay," she said, the word escaping before she could stop it. "Not as a prisoner. Not as a soldier. Stay with me." Joran looked at her, really looked, and for the first time she saw uncertainty in his eyes. Your people hate humans. The war isn't over. It could be, she said, her voice rising with conviction. If we choose peace. If we show them that compassion crosses species. He was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he turned his hand to interlace his fingers with hers. I've spent my life running toward battles, he said quietly. Maybe it's time I helped build something worth protecting. Outside, the twin moons aligned, casting silver light through the windows. Somewhere in the palace gardens, a moon petal bloomed for the first time in a century. A sign, the elders would say, of destiny rewritten. But neither of them knew that yet. All they knew was the warmth of joined hands, the quiet hum of a healing world, and the fragile, beautiful beginning of something neither war nor time could easily erase. Days turned into weeks. Joran was given quarters not in the prison wing, but in the Sunspire Tower, closest to the Queen's own chambers. He trained with the Royal Guard, not as a subordinate, but as an instructor, teaching them human tactics of defense and de-escalation. In return, they taught him the Zyran art of resonance combat, where warriors moved in harmonic patterns to amplify their strength. He learned to speak their language, stumbling over the melodic consonants, making Lysara laugh with his earnest mispronunciations. She, in turn, began visiting the orphanage in the lower city, something no queen had done in generations. With Joran beside her, she handed out food, mended clothes with her own hands, listened to the stories of displaced children from both sides of the war. One little girl, blue-skinned and shy, gave Joran a bracelet woven from scrap wire. He wore it every day, yet not all welcomed this change. High Chancellor Vraxis, a hawk-faced traditionalist, watched from the shadows, his loyalty to the old ways unwavering. You soften the throne, he warned Lysara during a private council. This human is a weapon. Use him, yes, but do not let him cloud your judgment. He's more than a weapon, she replied coolly. He's a mirror, and sometimes what we see in it is uncomfortable. Tensions simmered. Then came the news. The coalition fleet was massing at the edge of Zyran space. Peace talks had collapsed. War was returning, bigger and bloodier than before. Joran stood on the balcony overlooking the city, the wind tugging at his coat. Lysara joined him, her presence quiet but steady. I have to go back, he said without turning. My people think I'm dead. If I don't show them there's another way, you'll be branded a traitor, she finished. Maybe, he said, but if I stay, I'm just hiding. She stepped closer, her hand finding his again. Then let me go with you. He turned, startled. You can't. You're a queen. I'm also a warrior, she said, her eyes blazing. And if peace is to be born, it must be cradled by both sides. Before he could argue, she kissed him, softly, fiercely, a promise sealed in breath and heartbeat. When she pulled away, her cheeks were flushed, her white hair catching the starlight. We'll go together, she said, not as queen and prisoner, not as alien and human, but as partners. And so, under cover of night, they boarded a stealth skiff, one of the few ships capable of slipping past both fleets. Behind them, Virolith glittered like a dream. Ahead, uncertainty. But between them, something new. A fragile alliance, a shared hope, and the quiet understanding that love, in all its forms, was the most revolutionary act of all. The journey would be dangerous. Trust would be tested. Old enemies would rise. But as the skiff pierced the atmosphere, leaving the twin moons behind, Joran reached for Lysara's hand once more, and she held on tight. The skiff sliced through the void like a whisper, its cloaking field shimmering faintly as it navigated the debris fields left by the last skirmish between Coalition and Zyran forces. Inside, Joran monitored the scanners while Lysara adjusted the ship's resonance dampeners, her fingers dancing over controls that responded to her biometric signature alone. They had agreed, first stop, the neutral station of Helios Reach. There, they would contact General Terran Voss, Joran's former commanding officer and one of the few coalition leaders who still believed negotiation was possible. But fate had other plans. 3 hours into their journey, an alarm pulsed softly. Not red, but amber. Stealth breach, Lysara murmured, her brow furrowing. Someone's tracking us. Joran checked the long-range feed. A single vessel, sleek and black, bearing no insignia, hung just beyond sensor range. Ghost class, he said grimly. Coalition Black Ops. They don't exist on paper. Lysara's eyes narrowed. They're not after you. They're after me. Before Joran could ask why, The comms crackled to life. Not with static, but with a voice smooth as poisoned honey. Queen Lysara. How unexpected to find you playing stowaway with a human mutt. Lysara stiffened. Vraxis. High Chancellor Vraxis's hologram flickered into view above the console. His face sharp, his eyes cold. You've disgraced the throne, he said. Abandoning your people for a species that burns our temples and cages our children? The Crimson Fong were merely the beginning. Now the true dominion rises. Joran's blood ran cold. You funded them. Of course, Vraxis sneered. Chaos is the best fertilizer for order. And now, with you gone, I declare emergency succession. By dawn, I'll be crowned Regent Emperor. And your little pet human, he smiled thinly. He'll be displayed in chains at my coronation. A symbol of what happens when queens forget their blood. The transmission cut out. Lysara slammed her fist against the console. He's activated the Heartstone's failsafe protocol. If he reaches the chamber before we do, he can rewrite its resonance frequency. Turn it into a weapon that severs every Zyran mind from the collective. Our people will go mad. Millions will die. We have to turn back, Joran said immediately. No, she countered, her voice trembling with fury and fear. If we return now, he'll kill you on sight. And without you, there's no bridge between our peoples. I'm not leaving you to face him alone. Their eyes locked, two souls caught between duty and desire. Then Lysara made a decision. She rerouted the skiff's coordinates. We're not going to Helios Reach. We're going to Core Vale. Joran stared. That's a war zone. Exactly, she said. Vraxis thinks we're running, but we're going to strike where he least expects it, his supply lines. The Crimson Fong used Core Vale as a staging ground. If we destroy their munitions cache, we cut off his rebellion before it spreads. It was a desperate gamble, but desperation was all they had. They landed under cover of a sandstorm, the twin suns of Core Vale blotted out by swirling ochre clouds. The ruins of the refugee camp where Joran had once held the line still stood, charred skeletons of tents, shattered medpods, the ghost of screams in the wind. As they moved through the wreckage, Lysara noticed something Joran hadn't mentioned. Small stone markers, each carved with a name, dotting the perimeter. Human and Zyran names side by side. You did this, she whispered. After the battle, he said quietly. Couldn't let them be forgotten. Her throat tightened. This man didn't just save lives, he honored them. They found the munitions cache hidden beneath a collapsed medbay. Thermal charges, plasma cores, enough firepower to level a city. Joran set the detonators while Lysara kept watch. But as he worked, a shadow moved in the ruins. A child. Small, barefoot, her purple skin smudged with dust, white hair matted with grime. She couldn't have been more than 6. She clutched a broken doll, one eye missing, its dress stitched from scrap fabric. Joran froze. It's okay, he said gently, raising his hands. We're not here to hurt you. The girl didn't speak, but she pointed behind them. Lysara turned and saw them. Dozens of figures emerging from the storm. Not soldiers, civilians. Zyran elders, human survivors, mixed families huddled together in patched clothing. They'd been hiding in the ruins since the battle, surviving on rainwater and hope. We heard the queen was coming, an old human woman said, stepping forward. Said she walks with a human who treats Zyrans like people. Lysara's eyes filled with tears. You stayed all this time? We had nowhere else to go, the woman replied. But if you're fighting Vraxis, we stand with you. Joran looked at Lysara. We can't blow the cache now. Not with them here. She nodded. Then we fight another way. That night, in the belly of the ruins, plans were forged not by generals, but by grandmothers, mechanics, and children. They rigged the thermal charges not to explode, but to overload the local comms relay, broadcasting a signal across all Zyran frequencies. The truth about Vraxis's betrayal, paired with footage of Joran saving Zyran children during the battle, and Lysara feeding orphans in the palace gardens. At dawn, the signal went live. Across the Dominion, millions watched. In barracks, in marketplaces, in silent homes, the lie cracked open. Riots erupted, not of violence, but of awakening. Soldiers refused orders. Governors declared loyalty to the true queen. Even members of the Crimson Fong laid down their arms, ashamed. But Vraxis wasn't done. He activated the Heartstone anyway, not to sever minds, but to control them. Using stolen neural tech from the Coalition, he linked the Heartstone to a broadcast pulse that would enslave every Zyran within range, turning them into obedient drones. His coronation wasn't just symbolic. It was the birth of a hive-mind empire. Back on Virilith, the sky turned violet. Citizens fell to their knees, eyes glowing, voices chanting in unison. One mind, one will, one emperor. Lysara felt it, the pull in her skull, the seductive whisper urging her to submit. She gritted her teeth, clutching the small moon petal pendant Joran had given her. "I am not yours," she growled. Joran, immune to the pulse, grabbed her shoulders. "We need to get inside the palace. Shut down the core manually." "How?" "The entire city's under his control." Then the girl from the ruins stepped forward, the one with the broken doll. She held out a data chip. "My father was a palace engineer," she said softly. "Before Vraxis killed him, he hid this. It's a backdoor into the Heartstone's maintenance conduit." Hope, fragile but real, flickered. They returned to Virilith in a stolen cargo hauler, disguised as waste recyclers. The streets were eerily quiet, citizens moving in perfect sync, their faces blank. At the palace gates, they were stopped by two guards, former friends of Lysara, now hollow-eyed puppets. Joran stepped forward, holding up his hands. "We're just delivering bio-waste." The lead guard tilted his head, then suddenly blinked. "Joran?" His voice cracked. "I remember you, from Core Vale. You gave me water." For a moment the control wavered. The Heartstone's grip wasn't absolute. Memory was resistance. Lysara seized the opening. She placed her palm on the guard's forehead and sang. A low, resonant siren lullaby her mother once sang. The guard shuddered, then collapsed, weeping. The other guard followed. Inside the palace, chaos reigned. Courtiers shuffled like sleepwalkers. Sentinels stood frozen in formation. But deep in the lower levels, the heart chamber pulsed with unnatural light, black veins spreading across its surface. They reached the core just as Vraxis began the final sequence. He stood atop the pedestal, arms raised, his body fused with cables and neural filaments. "Too late, my queen," he hissed. "The age of choice is over. Only obedience remains." Joran charged, but Vraxis unleashed a shockwave that sent him crashing into the wall. Lysara tried to reach the override panel, but the floor itself seemed to reject her, tendrils of energy lashing at her legs. Then, from the doorway, a small voice cried out, "No!" The girl from Core Vale stood there, clutching her doll. Behind her, dozens of refugees, human and Zyran, poured into the chamber, holding hands, forming a circle. "We remember," the old woman said firmly, "and memory is stronger than control." One by one they began to sing, not in Zyran, not in human tongues, but in a new language, born of shared suffering and hope. The Heartstone trembled. The black veins receded. Vraxis screamed as the filaments tore from his flesh. The Heartstone rejected him, recognizing not a ruler, but a parasite. Lysara lunged for the override. With a final command, she severed the neural link. The pulse died. Across the city, people gasped awake, disoriented but free. Vraxis collapsed, broken and babbling. He would face trial, not execution, but exile to the silent moons, where he would live with nothing but his own thoughts. In the aftermath, the Dominion didn't crown a new emperor. Instead, a council was formed, humans and Zyrans seated together, drafting a charter of coexistence. Joran was offered citizenship, a home, a place at Lysara's side not as consort, but as co-regent. Yet peace was fragile. Weeks later, as they stood on the palace balcony watching the first joint human-Zyran school open in the capital, a message arrived from deep space. The Coalition High Command had labeled Joran a traitor. A bounty had been placed on his head. Worse, they were sending a dreadnought, the Iron Maw, to retrieve him or glass Virilith if necessary. Lysara turned to him, her eyes fierce. "Let them come." Joran took her hand. "This time we don't run. We show them what peace looks like, even if it costs us everything." And so, as the twin moons rose once more, the people of Virilith prepared. Not for war, but for witness. They lit lanterns in every window, planted moon petals along the landing pads, and opened their doors to strangers. Because the greatest rebellion wasn't fought with guns or thrones. It was fought with open hands, shared bread, and the courage to say, "You belong here." And somewhere in the stars, the Iron Maw slowed its approach. Not because of weapons, but because its captain, watching the live feed of a human and an alien queen standing side by side, finally understood. Some victories weren't won by force. They were one by love. The Iron Maw hung in orbit like a blade unsheathed, its hull scarred from 100 battles, its name whispered in dread across 3 sectors. Inside its command deck, Admiral Koravex, Joran's former mentor and the woman who'd once pinned a medal on his chest for valor at Corvale, watched the live feed from Virolith with stone-cold eyes. The image before her defied logic. A human man standing beside the Zyran Queen, not as prisoner or spy, but as partner. Children of both species played in palace courtyards. Markets bustled with shared commerce. And above it all, banners flew. Not of war, but of a new sigil. A bird in flight entwined with a moon petal. Impossible, she muttered. He's been compromised. But then the transmission shifted. It wasn't propaganda. It was raw footage. Unedited. Unfiltered. Joran teaching Zyran children how to plant earth wheat in hydroponic gardens. Lasara kneeling beside a wounded coalition scout, healing his burns with Zyran biogel. The Joint Council debating trade routes, not battle plans. And then, the moment that made Cora's breath catch. A recording from the refugee camp at Corvale, where Joran had buried the dead with his own hands, whispering names into the wind. She turned to her first officer. Patch me through. Direct channel. No filters. On Virolith, the palace alarm chimed softly. Not in warning, but in announcement. Joran stood in the Sunspire chamber, flanked by Lasara and the girl from the ruins, now named Lyra, after the Zyran word for light. Before them, a hologram flickered to life. Admiral Koravex, her face lined with decades of war, her eyes sharp as flint. Joran Vale, she said, voice low. You're charged with treason, desertion, and aiding the enemy. Surrender yourself, or we burn your fantasy to ash. Joran didn't flinch. There is no enemy here, Admiral. Only people trying to heal. You think kindness wins wars? She snapped. No, he said gently. But it ends them. Silence stretched between them, thick, heavy, full of ghosts. Then Cora's gaze drifted past him to Lasara. And you? You've bewitched him. Lasara stepped forward. I offered him nothing he didn't already carry in his heart. Compassion. Something your war has forgotten. Cora's jaw tightened. But then, almost imperceptibly, her eyes softened. My son died at Corvale. He was part of the unit that fired on the refugee convoy. I always told myself it was necessary. Collateral damage. She paused, her voice cracking. But I saw the logs. He hesitated, tried to call off the strike. They court-martialed him posthumously for cowardice. Joran's heart ached. He wasn't a coward, Admiral. He was human. Tears welled in Cora's eyes, rare for a woman who'd commanded fleets through hell. Then maybe it's time we remembered what that means. She turned to her bridge crew. Stand down weapons. Signal all coalition vessels. Ceasefire in Zyran space. Effective immediately. Gasps echoed through the command deck. Admiral, High Command will have you stripped. Let them, she said, straightening her coat. If peace begins with one act of courage, let it begin with mine. On Virolith, cheers erupted. Not just from the palace, but from every city, every village. The dreadnought's guns powered down. Its landing bay opened. 3 days later, Admiral Koravex walked onto Zyran soil, not as conqueror, but as guest. She knelt before the memorial stones at Corvale, placing a single earth rose beside the name of her son. Joran stood beside her, silent. When she rose, she looked at Lasara. Your people, they mourn differently. With song, not silence. We believe grief is love with nowhere to go, Lasara replied. So we give it wings. Cora nodded slowly. Then perhaps, we've been burying ours too deep. Peace did not come overnight. Old wounds festered. Factions resisted. But something had shifted irrevocably. The Coalition and the Zyran Dominion signed the Treaty of Twin Moons, establishing the first interspecies alliance in galactic history. Joint academies were built. Medical exchanges flourished. And at the heart of it all stood Joran and Lasara. Not as rulers, but as living proof that enemies could become family. Years passed. In the royal gardens of Virolith, now interwoven with earth oaks and Zyran moon petals, a small boy chased fireflies. His skin a soft lavender, his hair a cascade of black streaked with white. Behind him, a girl with warm brown skin and violet eyes laughed, calling him back. Their names were Kaelin and Mira, named for the stars that watched over their parents' first meeting. Joran sat on a bench nearby, his hair now silver at the temples, his hands rough but gentle as he carved a wooden bird for his youngest. Lysara leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, her once regal armor replaced by simple robes woven with threads of both worlds. They had not married in ceremony, no grand spectacle, no political fanfare. Instead, on the anniversary of the day he removed his helmet, they stood beneath the twin moons and exchanged vows written in 2 languages, sealed with a kiss and a shared breath. They had many children, not just their own, but those they adopted from war-torn corners of the galaxy. A green-skinned orphan from the ash wastes, a blue-eyed refugee from the ice belt, even the little girl Lyra, now a scholar of interspecies law. The palace was no longer a seat of power, but a home. And every evening, without fail, Joran would walk to the edge of the garden, look up at the stars and whisper, "We made it, sister." One night, as the moons aligned once more, casting silver light over the sleeping city, Lysara took his hand. "Do you ever regret staying?" Joran smiled, squeezing her fingers. "I didn't stay for you. I stayed because this place, these people, became my home. And you became my heart." She rested her forehead against his. "Then let the stars bear witness. Our story isn't about war or thrones. It's about 2 souls who chose to see each other, and in doing so, changed everything." And high above, in the quiet expanse of the cosmos, the universe held its breath. Not in anticipation of conflict, but in reverence for peace, finally blooming like a moon petal after a long winter. Under the twin moons of Virilith, Joran and Lysara were finally wed. Not in a grand hall, but in the quiet garden where they'd first held hands, surrounded by children of every hue and origin. The ceremony was simple. Vows spoken in both languages, rings forged from salvaged starship metal and moon petal vines, and a shared cup of earth wine mixed with Zyran nectar. From that day on, they ruled not as queen and consort, but as equals, partners in peace, parents to many, and guardians of a new era. Their first child, Kaelin, inherited Joran's steady eyes and Lysara's luminous hair. Their second, Mira, carried her mother's grace and her father's stubborn kindness. They adopted orphans from battlefields and refugee camps. Green-skinned toddlers, blue-eyed infants, even a shy desert boy who whispered secrets to plants. The palace echoed with laughter, scraped knees, bedtime stories in 3 languages, and the clatter of tiny boots racing through crystal halls. Joran taught them how to fix engines and plant gardens. Lysara showed them how to sing to the stars and heal with touch. On warm nights, they'd gather on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, counting comets and sharing dreams. Enemies became neighbors, soldiers became teachers, and the Heartstone, once a weapon of control, now pulsed gently with the joy of a united people. Years flowed like rivers, carving deep roots of love and legacy. When gray touched Joran's temples and silver streaked Lysara's white hair, they still danced barefoot in the rain, just as they had on their wedding night. Their children grew, married, and brought grandchildren. Tiny hybrids with curious eyes and boundless hearts. The galaxy watched in awe as the human and the alien queen built not an empire, but a family so vast and loving it became legend. And when travelers asked how peace began, elders would smile and say, "It started with a helmet removed and a hand held." In time, statues were raised, not of warriors, but of a man and woman kneeling to tie a child's shoe. Their love story became the first chapter in every schoolbook, a beacon for all who believed compassion could conquer chaos. And though war still flickered at the edges of the stars, Virilith remained a sanctuary, where purple and brown skin played side by side, where lullabies blended earth and Zyran melodies, and where every meal ended with "I love you" in 10 different tongues. They never sought glory. They only chose each other, again and again. And in that choice they found everything.